In 1687, Isaac Newton attempted to explain the movements of everything in the universe, from a pea rolling on a plate to the position of Pluto. It was a brilliant, vaultingly ambitious and fiendishly complex task. It took him 3 sentences. These are the 3 laws of motion.
The first law tells us that matter can't move itself. What the first law is saying is that matter on its own is passive and inert, and if it ever changes, that's because something from the outside is affecting it, and that seems very important.
And what we have in the second law is the fact that forces cause change in motion.
The first law says nothing happens unless something comes along to change it, and the second law says, and the amount that it changes is strongly related to how much is changing.
Third law, perhaps most famous, generally known, every action produces an equal and opposite reaction.
Now, if you have, for example, 2 billiard balls coming along and colliding, there you get the example of the first billiard ball exerts a force on the second one, and the second one exerts an equal and opposite force on the first. So you've got the opposition of forces. They're both equal, they're opposite, but they're acting on different bodies.
What happens when we take away the reaction force R? Removing R made the vertical forces on the building unbalanced. The building started accelerating downwards due to gravity. At 610 feet tall, it would take 6.2 seconds for the World Trade Center 7 building to fall in free fall time.
These are principles of how we think. They are actually hardwired, as it were, in our minds. It's impossible to think these laws are false. It's impossible to think, for example, that it's false that everything stays as it is unless something changes it. That's a self-evident truth.
The World Trade Center 7 tower collapsed in free fall time. How was this possible? The BBC recently reported the mystery solved. Remember, the force W and its equal and opposite force R are vertically aligned.
Fires burnt long enough to weaken and break many of the connections that held the steel structure together. Most susceptible were the thinner floor beams, which required less fireproofing, and the connections between the beams and the columns. As they heated up, the connections failed, and the beams sagged and failed also.
The gravity loads should have been transmitted through each individual column, core and perimeter, all the way down to the foundation. WTC7 had 81 columns to support its structure.
It is possible that you could have a local failure as a result of a connection failing. But the likelihood of that failure dragging the entire building in such a fashion that all the columns would fail at the same time is an impossibility.
Controlled demolition can remove all the columns and therefore the equal and opposite reaction force R. Fire cannot do this.